Hello, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tech Exec podcast, where we talk about creating a team worth leading. As always, I'm your host, Aviv Ben-Yosef, advisor and consultant to tech execs worldwide, and our subject today is profitable R&D. If you're not subscribed to my newsletter, which is shame on you because it's free and amazing, I just wrapped up a 4-part series about making your R&D organization profitable. After all, this has been something that is now one of the most important things for so many of the companies I'm talking to. R&D can no longer just grow for the sake of growing. All of a sudden, we're looking at startups, at teams, as something that needs to be profitable. What does it even mean? I know that so many of you listening have actually started your careers after the previous crisis, meaning that for all of your careers, you essentially saw startups just becoming easier and easier when it came to financing, and you thought that just growing and growing was the default, and that has not been the case for about a year now. And the question is, how does that change our modus operandi? How should we be acting differently? Today, I'm going to quickly go over the 4 topics that my 4-part series on the blog covers so that you get a tasting of that. If you want to dig in deeper, of course, you can just go to the links in the show notes and get to the actual articles to get more information. But I thought for those of you who just like to consume things by podcast, you definitely should not be missing out on this. So, with that in mind, I want to cover a few things. First of all, what does it even mean to have a highly profitable engineering team? The fact is that right now, a profitable product engineering team, and I look at product engineering together, is something that is not growing linearly as the business grows. So think about it. If you have to keep growing your team just to keep the lights on as the business grows, and in a way that's linear, like if we get 10 more clients, the growth in our engineering is about the same. That means that you're not building profitable software, because software is supposed to be about zero or very low margin. And if you have to keep growing the team, it means that something in there is broken. Something is not operating as it should. Oftentimes, it means that you have way too much professional services going on as part of closing deals, as part of high-touch sales, whatever. And also that you probably have some quality issues in things that have not been automated enough, so that you have to have all of this ongoing work just to support business as it is. And that's unhealthy growth. You don't need to be doing that. You need to also make sure that your team aligns its complexity. And that means that, for example, when things become more complex, it should be in alignment with what the business needs. An example of misalignment would be how so many teams have gotten their microservices play so out of hand, where the system keeps getting so convoluted, so complex, even if the business itself is not getting any more complex or that more complex. We're adding so many microservices, making the infrastructure such a nightmare to support, even for small teams, and that means that we are misaligning our infrastructure with how the business is supposed to be growing. If you have some microservices to support different vectors of growth, so that you know that this is something that's going to be growing, and therefore that's something I want to take out so we can scale it, okay, awesome. However, just breaking down everything so that every single field in your database is behind a different microservice. And yeah, this might sound a bit like hyperbole, but it's not that far-fetched from things I have seen and I have witnessed in startups. Then you are doing things incorrectly. Second, realize that tech debt and tech investments nowadays, when we're talking about profitable R&D, is no longer something you should just be doing out of momentum. You need to be handling these when you can show that it makes sense. So if you still have a fixed amount of engineering time, or whatever you want to call it, to do whatever your team feels like doing, that's usually a very bad sign. It's a red flag. It means that the team is going to fill up those 20, 30, whatever percent of your time that you have with things, regardless of how important those things really are. Because I've never seen an engineer, well, I have, but it's so rare to see engineers come up and say, hey, I know I have 20% to do something this quarter, but I don't think what we have on the roadmap is that important. So maybe let's not do those. We're going to be doing those. We're going to find something. We're going to tackle some tech debt. We're going to replace something, even if the value we get out of that is not going to be all that significant. Even if that time could be better invested in a new feature or helping someone else in the company by creating tools for them. You need to be thinking about that. And lastly, high profitable engineering teams are teams where the talent grows, because your growth should not be just stemming up from bringing in more and more people, but by helping that organization you've worked so hard to create to become better as it is. And I've seen teams that have been give or take static for 12 months, but getting so much better because those people are learning to work together better, are growing, and therefore creating a team that's more and more profitable. You have the same team, you're not wasting time, you're not spending money on hiring people, interviewing, etc. And you're helping your people that you already have become even better. That's amazing, right? And that's what you want to be doing. Now, part 2 of the series is about making software that's profitable. Specifically, I just talked about, maybe you have too much professional services going on, stuff like that. And this is something that I've seen so many times working with SaaS companies where no one actually understands, hey, is this even profitable? We are signing up all of these big clients, and actually those might be your least profitable clients because you have to do so many things to get them on board that it no longer makes sense, especially if the work you're doing is one-off work solely for those clients and not things that are going to pay off down the line as you get more similar clients. For example, think about your contracts. If you have different versions, how many versions should you continue supporting back? Can you just say this is the new one because there are a few critical bug fixes here and be done? Or do you have to go back and support, 6 months worth of releases across I don't know how many clients? How much access do you have to test things, to look at logs, to understand what's going on so you can solve issues faster? What are your SLAs and who decide about them? Because I've seen companies where SLAs were so badly abused, where everything turned into a P0 if someone felt like a client might be getting angry, and teams were getting burned out, just having to tackle issues at a minute's notice, even when those issues weren't really that bad, etc., etc. Think about the support matrix that you have to create given your contracts. How many versions you've got, how many different ways of installing and running your software. Is it on-premise? Is it on X amounts of clouds or a single cloud, one region, multi-region? All of those things pile up, and if you have a small nascent team, that's going to be almost impossible to do that well and also perform in a profitable manner. And lastly, one last bit, because I don't want to cover the entire article here real fast, you have to make sure that whatever you're doing makes sense. So for example, professional services, not a good thing. And so many founders do it without realizing it's professional services or lying to themselves that's not it, but it is. So don't do that. Have good magic numbers. And I know we hate magic numbers in code, but you know what I love? I love magic numbers in pricing pages. I don't want to see anything listed as unlimited blah, because if you have an unlimited number of these or that, someone's going to abuse it. And especially if it's one of your lower cost plans, that's not going to pay off. Next, let's consider your org structure and how it grows. If you're still hiring people, I'm guessing you're no longer in hypergrowth, and I think that it should be clear by now that whenever you're hiring someone, it should be hiring for value. Think about the value that position is supposed to create for the organization, for the company. You don't want to hire for the sake of hiring. You don't want to hire automatically. And for example, if someone's leaving, don't automatically start filling in that position. Think whether the money, the investment required for that position can't be better spent someplace else. Because sometimes when people leave, when people go on extended vacations, whatever, they're doing you a favor and you should be thinking about it. Don't do things automatically. Create sensible structures. I'm against nano teams that are so small that you have one manager managing a person or two, because that creates micromanagers and creates so much overhead when it comes to the managerial overhead, the structure of the team, the communication patterns. Don't do that. create teams that are sensible, about 6 people to 8 people most of the time. Focus on needle-moving projects. If I told you right now that you had to cut 40% of everything your team is doing and focus on the top 60%, I'm guessing right now, just hearing this, you already have some ideas about projects you can and things will still be good. And why is that? If you have any projects right now that are not needle movers, then those are projects that need to be canceled. Don't wait till the layoffs happen. Don't wait till things get that bad. Right now, move those people to focus on things that are more likely to move the needle. And again, when I'm talking about profitable R&D, as tough as it may sound, I don't want to get to rounds of layoffs, but that means that when I have people who are not cutting it, who are not good fit, I will be managing that as soon as possible. Give them feedback, try and move them if needed, create some coaching structures around, but don't let that drag on until it gets too bad, because eventually that's when you'll get the layoffs. That's when you'll get entire project stopped because you have to lay off too many people. And I honestly believe we're doing people a favor when we are proactively coaching them, helping them if needed, saying that, yeah, this is not working out, because then they will probably have more time to find a better role than when things get too far. And lastly, in a profitable R&D organization, the question is, how do you make innovation profitable? I keep talking about innovation being habitual, daily, not the hackathon once or twice a year that you have. To do that, first of all, I need to spot what's unprofitable innovation, like those hackathons that end up usually with a couple of nice photos for LinkedIn, but no actual projects that are maintained after the hackathon. And what does healthy innovation look like? Think about all those times where someone came up with an idea that turned into a real feature, that you made things so much better, and you have now, for example, a new tool that makes engineers' lives so much better because you have this small tool, because you helped someone else in the company work better. So, to have healthy innovation, cut debt wisely. If you're spending time on tech debt, it should be because you're making the entire organization actively better, things that people can see, not just have a good feeling about, because we know that some line in the repo looks better, but that actually makes our lives easier. Amass tech capital. The opposite of tech debt is tech capital, and that's about creating tools that help us as a company work better. Now with all of these AI tools out there, there are so many capabilities of doing things a lot faster and easier for people all around. Think about, what can you do? What can you allow people in your company do with just a simple integration with a few APIs now? Consider that. These are not just engineering velocity upgrades, but things that can actually lead to lots of small superpowers for everyone in the company. Create innovation platforms that is room to be innovative, that is talking about what are good bets and how we place them. So if I have an idea for something, it's not just because I saw it topping Hacker News and it looks cool. That's because I can sensibly describe a scenario where doing this can pay off. Maybe I'm not sure. That's what innovation is all about. We have to take some risks, but I can see a path where this might turn into something valuable. It's not just shooting in the dark. And then we find the time for that. If you want to get more information about that, check my book, The Tech Executive Operating System, for a full guide about intermissions, innovation weeks, whatever you want to call it. And when we have all of these in place, you know what you can create? A genuinely profitable R&D team that's not just something amazing for the business, but something where every employee you're going to have is going to remember this as something unique, something that they probably haven't seen prior in their careers, or something that, let's face it, they're not very likely to see later in their careers unless they stumble upon another leader like you who knows how to lead a team worth leading. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. One last message is that as we're doing this, if you're listening to this, thinking about what profitability means for your team, thinking about what would it take to grow, to become a leader that can generate such amazing impact in your company as a founder, as an employee, whatever it is, and you're thinking, that sounds like something I want to be doing, but I'm not sure how, reach out to me. Let's schedule a free discovery call. My email is in the show notes, and I would love to hear and see if maybe I can help you get there. That's it for this week. As always, check out my newsletter where you could have gotten these articles weeks ago. Link in the show notes. I'll be here next week.